Okay. So let's just do look at the very end of section 1, and then we'll do section 2 today. Okay. So we said between the giver and the recipient, like a wedding ceremony, there's a external connection that's forged first before there can be an internal connection. Okay. For the actual wedding ceremony of the marriage ceremony, the groom covers the face of the bride with a veil, thus establishing an external bond between the mishpi and the mikabel, the giver and the receiver, right? The groom and the bride. However, this external bond is intended to enable inner influence to be conveyed, right? So it's not an end in itself; it's a preparatory stage for there to be an internal exchange, or a giving ultimately by the groom into the bride at an internal level. Okay. To explain the above concepts, Rabba Mikame de Fasach, Lurhul Rabbanan Amar Milsa Divdichusa. Our sages said in Psachim 117a, before beginning his lesson to the scholars, Rabba would make humorous remarks. Right? This is commonplace in a lot of lectures. Uvadchu Rabbanan, and his students would laugh. And this actually connects to what we said in the Lecha Dodi 5726, maamar of the Rebbe, where we said laughing isn't a revelation of essence, because you're completely just revealing yourself, opening yourself. You're lighter when you laugh. Afterwards, he sat in awe and commenced the lecture. So he would only open up with a humorous remark to open them up, so they can receive ultimately something much more internal, something much more deep. Rabba's example demonstrates how a mashpia should first arouse the attention of his students, making them the recipients of his wisdom, fit to accept the influence he conveys. He accomplishes this by stimulating the students' senses and faculties. So first there's the stimulation, and only then are they fit to receive. Initially, he must begin his lesson on a level to which the students of the Mekablim can relate. Right, because he's at a higher level and they're at a lower level. So first he has to somehow elevate them in order for them to be able to fit to receive whatever he wants to give over in his lesson. Therefore, in order to elevate the lesson of his listeners before beginning his lesson to the scholars, in order to make the mediums capable of receiving the teachings he would convey, Rabba began his lesson with a humorous statement. Rabba's witticism should not be regarded in an undignified sense. The concept of humor here refers to the casual conversations of scholars. True, as our sages comment, even the casual conversation of scholars demand study, because it contains great wisdom and deep insights. It nevertheless represents only the external aspects of the scholar's potential. Certainly, this level of casual conversation of a sage is commensurate to his intellectual capacity, and the casual conversation of a great sage is of an extremely elevated nature. And truly profound concepts can be derived from it. Although the sage's casual conversation is merely withered leaves in comparison with their true potential, nevertheless they are essentials of wisdom. As the sage was laying in the Gemara of Ksubos 10a, the statements of the sages are blessings, the statements of the sages are wealth, the statements of the sages heal. The realm of casual conversation relates to the efforts described as the service of Torah. A sage's casual conversation can give expression to his inner self. Thus, Chassidus interprets the phrase of the Haggadah, the wise son. What does he say? The wise son, what he says is, what he is, he says. The way he talks expresses who he really is. It's a clear revelation of essence. Similarly, through being with him in the midst of his everyday functioning, observing the way he conducts himself, one is able to appreciate a sage's inner character, which is not necessarily expressed in the intellectual concepts he teaches. right? So you can learn something that's not necessarily covered in what he's teaching directly. You can learn something from him just by observing him and hanging around him. Thus, the sages come and serving a Torah scholar surpasses studying under him. Shnamar poi Elisha ben Shafat asher yatzach mayim al yidei Eliyahu. As proof, they refer to the biblical reference to the prophet Elisha ben Shaphan, who was praised for having poured water in Eliyahu's hands. The Talmud notes that no mention is made of Elisha having studied Torah under Eliyahu, only that he poured water over his hands. Hence it comments, This teaches that serving a scholar, Torah scholar, surpasses studying under him. As mentioned above, after the humorous introduction, Rabbi would sit in awe and commence his lesson. For the study of Torah must be charged with the fear of heaven, since the teacher is on a fundamentally higher level than his students. For the student to truly grasp the wisdom his teacher will convey to him, he must transcend his own personality and sit before his teacher with true bittul, rising above his self-concern. As the sages state, just as the Jews received the Torah on Mount Sinai with awe and fear, trembling and quaking, Afkan Chulan, so too must Torah study in subsequent times evoke similar feelings. Right? There has to be a certain sense of awe, a focused awareness. With regard to the giving of the Torah, it's written, and the people saw and they trembled and stood off from afar. Someone whenever one studies the Torah, he must reach greater bittul and fear. These feelings represent the proper approach to Torah study. However, to reach the level of feeling, it's necessary for the teacher to first stimulate the student's faculties. This is achieved by making a humorous remark, as knowing the general purpose of a humorous remark that precedes study, is to elevate and raise the students to a level at which they will be capable of receiving the influence conveyed to them by the mashpia. The Rabbi Salmid, by nature, a teacher and student are not on a comparable level. Right, that's by definition. For the reason that a student must be in a state of bittul before his teacher, so he can receive. As Sage said, if a scholar sits before his teacher and his lips do not trip anxiety, our sages arrive at this concept by interpreting the term more as mar, bitterness. The student must feel bitterness, attaining complete bittul. The humorous remark thus empowers the student to be able to accept his teacher's lesson. In general, it opens up his heart and mind, thereby making him a vessel or recipient. Even though the approach of humor reflects an external dimension, it nevertheless prepares the student for the communication of the deeper inner message the teacher will later share. Only through the closeness brought about by the teacher's humor, can the students later receive the deeper inner insights communicated in the lesson. A different example expresses the same concept. A father has a young small child. When his father desires to delight with him face to face, since the child is much smaller than he, the father must first lower his hands, which are themselves higher and more elevated than the child's head, even below the child, and then lift him up to the level of the father's own head. Only then can he talk and delight with him face to face. On the surface, the expression of kindness and lowering his arms to pick up the child is only a superficial expression of the father's love. Shehurak lahagbiya es hatinok. He is just lifting up the child. V'chein hatinok einoi kabel shum davar b'hagbaha zoy. Similarly, the child does not receive anything tangible from the act itself. Ki halo yeshi, ki halo lo yesh v'zeh shum hashpa. In its own right, the act of lifting up the child does not express anything. Hashpa v'hasha'ashu im b'noi hurak achar kach. The communication of the light with his son comes only afterwards. Ki asher kvar after the father has already lifted him up. It is only that it is impossible for there to be a close and inner communication without first drawing close and lifting up the makabel, enabling him to approach the level mashpia. So there has to be an initial stage where the higher level lifts up the lower level at an external level so that the lower level can receive from the higher level. True, this is a superficial relationship. But its purpose is the establishment of a bridge for the inner communication. But it's superficial, but it's ultimately going to establish the ability for there to be a significant and profound connection established. Okay, let's do the summary, and then we'll stop with this for today. This section explains that Rabbi commenced his lesson to the scholars in order to make them vessels capable of receiving the Torah insights that he would communicate. Amar lahem milsa dividichusa. He would relate a humorous remark to them. He would start with a joke. His humor was intended to elevate his recipients, enabling them to receive the influence he would convey that was above their ordinary level. A similar principle applies in regard to the statement, serving a Torah scholar surpasses that of studying under him. Although the above-mentioned relationships are external in comparison to the inner communication later received from the sage, they are nevertheless a necessary preliminary stage. This concept is illustrated by the analogy of a father who reaches down to lift up his small son to delight with him face to face. So he has to lift him up first externally in order for there to be an internal connection established. Okay, that's it for today. Stop here for today. Yashko.